Welcome back. OPEC accounts for 40% of the world's oil production, so it has considerable sway over oil supplies. Does it, however, have sway over oil prices, particularly when they're causing so much suffering? Let's just remind ourselves of how those prices have risen over the past 6 months. Oil broke through the $100 a barrel mark at the beginning of January, meaning prices had doubled within a year. There was a slight dip in February, but by March it had soared to $110 a barrel. And then earlier this month, you'll remember, it hit the highest ever level, trading briefly at $140. Now, Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah has been outlining his country's efforts to increase production, as we saw. He announced that billion-dollar donation to help developing countries. But what of OPEC itself? It says it's leaving the market to decide how much a barrel of oil should cost. But could it, or even should it, do more to influence that soaring figure? Still with us, our guests for today in London, Mamdouh Salameh, in Bristol, Christopher Moulton, and also in London, Manusha Tarkin. Gentlemen, thanks for staying with us. Before we carry on, I just want to read to you something. It is part of OPEC's solemn declaration, basically its code of conduct. This is article number 8 of the declaration, and it reads, the sovereigns and heads of states declare that their countries are willing to continue to make positive contributions towards the solution of major problems affecting the world economy. Positive solutions towards solving economic problems. Let me put that to Manusha Tarkin in London. Do you think OPEC are actually fulfilling that pledge at the moment?
Well, I think you have to be fair. In the past 3 or 4 years, since the price of oil began to rise in 2003, 2004, they did increase on a number of occasions their production ceiling in order to ameliorate the rise in the price. But now, of course, there are various issues which have made the price go even higher, and that is where the debate comes, that they say it is not only the supply and demand balance, it is the role of speculators and so on and so forth. That I can go further if you wish. So I think from OPEC point, from your question, that the subject that you raised, OPEC can have an impact, and I think Saudi Arabia still can increase production by another million or so, or even more than that barrels per day. It will be a bit heavy oil, relatively speaking, compared with their light oil, the one which is now available. In about a year or two, they will have more light oil coming in, but the existing spare capacity is generally heavy oil. So as well as producing it, they should also reduce its price so that the refineries, ordinary refineries, would find it profitable to refine the Saudi heavy oil, and that will have an impact on the price of oil.
So broadly speaking, the only thing which OPEC can really do in its capacity is to increase production.
Yes, of course, and lower the price in this case because the differential has to be greater, as I explained. But of course, let's also be fair to say that the debate that's going on now, we have 130, 100, you know, we can't imagine the price falling, but let us not forget that if there is another million barrel now coming promised by Saudi Arabia, it will reach the market, the consumers, in about 2 or 3 months, and it might be the end of the summer. If there are no crises such as the hurricanes in the US and so on, if the present recession indications tend to be more serious, global economy slows down and so on and so forth, which then there will be downward pressure on the price. I would argue that then these investors or speculators, what might refer to them, they will take their funds out, and the price will come down, and it could collapse. It could come down suddenly, you know, to $50, $60 a barrel. This is a possibility. One can argue for and against. Is a possibility. I think that is why OPEC and Saudi Arabia do not want to put too much oil into the market now.
Mamdouh Salameh in London, what do you make of that comment, that they don't want to put too much into the markets now, at least?
Well, at present, OPEC has hardly any extra production capacity. Consequently, they cannot influence the steep rise in the oil price. They have become spectators. However, if they decide to invest, they will need around $30 billion. I am sure they can afford it. Over 5 years' time, they can add at least 3 million barrels a day. However, they are not going to cause a glut in the market, because they learned their lessons in the 1980s, early 80s, when they invested billions of dollars and increased their extra capacity to 5 million barrels a day, to find out that in 1986 the price has collapsed to $10 a barrel. So they learned that lesson. They are not going to do, if they are going to invest in extra production capacity, they will do it in a gradual way, allowing for time and watching the market very carefully.
Let's go back to Christopher Moulton in Bristol. Another comment which I picked up from Gordon Brown in Jeddah was that he wants the OPEC countries, the cash-rich Gulf countries, to invest more into renewable energy sources. Is that realistic, do you think, given that a lot of these economies in the Gulf are pretty much built on oil dollars?
Yes, this is the big problem. You were talking just then about investing $30 billion in extra refining capacity, but it's going nowhere. The whole thing's crazy. Whichever way, there's two real serious problems. One is the burning of fossil fuels, which you shouldn't be doing anyway, and certainly increasing it can't help with the whole climate change problems. But the fact that you're just increasing, taking out of the ground what is a finite source, it's going nowhere. It won't make any sense. So why not spend the $30 billion, which is a very sizable, sensible amount of money, and put that into alternative sources, which could be done tomorrow. It could really start. There are plenty of people around the world, and forget my little company, there are plenty of people around the world who could really do things with that sort of money so that we are not reliant on oil. It's no good pretending the oil it'll be all right and it'll last. It won't. It really won't, and we shouldn't be using it anyway.
But
picking up all that.
Here's the kicker, though. Sorry to interrupt you, but no. I'm wondering if there is, what type of money there is in renewable energy, because as we see with oil up around $130 a barrel, it's obvious that these countries and companies, I should add as well, the oil companies would want to stay in this business because they're making a lot of money from it.
Exactly, and why they are the last people who are looking to invest in renewable energy. They shouldn't have anything to do with it, frankly. What needs to happen is that the money that they're making, the excess profits that they're making, and frankly I don't blame them for making it, that should be used by other people to invest in sensible renewable energy programs. And can I just say something? You're talking about oil costing $140 a barrel. That's not the cost of it, that is an artificial price. It used to be $20 a barrel, and I don't think it costs any more to get it out of the ground now than it did then. The price is totally artificial. So please don't talk about the cost of oil. It's the price of oil, it's a market commodity.
Okay, then let's put that to Manusha Tarkin in London, because what OPEC is essentially saying is they want to let the market decide the price of oil. I want to throw out an idea. It might be a little bit simplistic, but could there be room for a sort of international regulatory body which would look at the price of oil so that it didn't affect the poor people or anyone who's being affected by high prices of fuel and oil? Is there room for something like that?
Well, that is a separate argument. This is on development economics, international aid, and so on, as Dr. Mamdouh Salami was mentioning, World Bank, other institutions. I must also mention OPEC has an organization called OPEC Fund. Is a major fund which has been there for many years now, and they do go to different countries and they help. It's not just giving cash, they invest in development projects.
Final thought then, just a brief one from Mamdouh Salami in London. We've been talking about the price. Christopher Moulton made the point that the price can be overinflated, it can just be an indication. Where do you think we're headed? We've gone as high as 140, where do you think it could be headed?
First, the price is not overinflated. The price is a reflection of the reality in the market. There is a growing and widening gap between global supplies and global demand of oil, and that is reflected in the steep rise in the oil price. We have never had a period more than 4 years of oil price rise. That has to be explained by what I always call the peak oil theory. That is, there is a growing deficit between supplies and demand, which has to be reflected in the oil price. You can add to that the war on Iraq has caused the price to rise from $25 in 2003 to more than $139 in May 2008. and that has accounted for 65% of the rise in the oil price. So if you take that war factor, according to my research, plus the peak oil theory, we know that these two factors have been very instrumental in the steep rise of the oil price.
Gentlemen, we're all out of time here on Inside Story. My thanks to Mamdouh Salameh in London, also Christopher Moulton in Bristol, and Manusha Tarkan also in London. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us, and thank you, our viewer, for being here for this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments, your suggestions. As always, email them to insidestory@aljazeera.net. From the whole team, goodbye for now.